there are stories of people every single day that are impacted by what's happening. This should be the foundation or whatever, wherever you are, whatever operation or program you're running. This is like really get the people involved, because the one thing that I've seen from it is once they get involved and they feel seen within the movement, they bring other people with them. And now we're growing it. And now we're expanding to different communities and really spreading the brand and elevating the voices.
Hi, and welcome back to the Campaign Strategist. Today, we're talking with Durrell Johnson, a seasoned communications strategist, photojournalist, and producer with over 15 years of experience crafting timely, strategic content for newsrooms, nonprofits, and public campaigns. Born and raised in Raleigh, North Carolina, Durrell spent a decade as an award-winning photojournalist covering everything from NCAA tournaments to landmark political battles. In 2019, Durrell joined the North Carolina Counts Coalition, most recently helping to lead the coalition against gubernatorial candidate Mark Robinson. Durrell, I'm so glad to have you on the Campaign Strategist. Thanks so much for joining
Thanks
us.
for having me. Appreciate being here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, like how you got into advocacy and organizing work.
I always wanted to work in news. I always wanted to work in journalism. This was a dream of mine to, go to college, get a degree in journalism, start working in a newsroom, telling stories of people. That's always been a passion of mine, just telling folk stories. I was living my dream. I was enjoying my job and my career. There were two things. One is I've always felt like news has done a great job in terms of covering a lot of hard issues. We all have our own perception of what journalism is. We have our perceptions of which outlet does what and which journalist is good or bad, and rightfully so. I know that myself and a lot of folks I work with, we spend a lot of time really trying to make sure that we're doing the best and uplifting people's voices and what's going on in the communities that we work in. And so within that, I felt at a point in my career like I really want to do more. And again, I'm living my dream. So I'm like, what more could I possibly be doing? I always ask myself, how do I get better? What can I do to be better? What can I do to utilize the skills that I've been taught to help tell folks stories? I was actually watching one of the stories that I did just to, see how it looks. And another story came on. And it featured a friend that I went to high school with talking about the 2020 census. After the broadcast went off, I reached out to my friends and said, hey, I didn't realize you was doing that. What's going on? We had a conversation. She really talked how important the census were. And her big thing is, how do we uplift that to educate people, the point of the census, the purpose of it, and just why we have to be accurate in the count. And she sold me a compelling story on what the census is important to count every person accurately, no matter where they live, no matter what their status is, but also how that turns into representation in our government, how that turns into representation of funding. And I decided to take that leap of faith and, jump in on the 2020 census campaign. And I have to say it's one of the best decisions just because I've learned so much. I got to still incorporate some of my journalism skills, really travel across the state of North Carolina and meet more people and share their stories, but also educate them on why it's important to take the census and what does it mean for our representation, not only here in North Carolina, but in DC on the federal level. So that's how I got in. And I've been hooked ever since, just really uplifting the voices of North Carolinians. I mean, there's issues going on every single day in this country. And there are people that are waking up and trying to figure out, how to survive. And, a lot of the reasons that they're faced with these challenges is because of decision makers. And so really educating folks on the importance of, the first step is taking your census, because that equals to representation, that equals to $1 funding for the programs that you rely on, but also taking that first step in civic engagement. Okay, we done this part. Now look, this is how it looks on the end in terms of this is the person that represents you and the everyday issues that you're facing, the person you should be talking to really uplift your community. I'm locked in. I'm here for life, but I really love and enjoy the fact that I thought I was living my dream. And I thought that was it for me. And then somehow, just by watching my own news broadcast, I see one of my friends talking about the census and now I'm doing this work. So
I met you at the America Votes conference, and I was really drawn in by the story you told about your work and the massive coalition that you helped to pull together and lead that was focused on Mark Robinson's campaign for governor. So will you set the table for us? Like, what was going on in North Carolina politically, and what was it about Mark Robinson? I mean, probably a lot of people have seen and hopefully recall some of the coverage about some of his wilder sort of extremist conduct and thinking, but tell us about how the coalition came together.
we knew right after 2020 2020, Robinson County came to political spotlight, really got a lot of traction right after the Parkland shootings in Guilford County area. There was a scheduled gun show that the county was planning on canceling in respect of what's been happening. And Mark Robinson pretty much went to a city council meeting or county commission meeting and really became social media famous about not canceling and protecting his Second Amendment. And so what we saw was from there, he catapulted into the political arena. He ran for lieutenant governor in North Carolina. He won the seat. And we already knew, like, as soon as he won the lieutenant governor's seat in 2020, he had ambitions on being governor of North Carolina. He was one step away. And so he announced he was running for governor. We were already in the steps of just really learning more about him, but also just hearing from, just hearing his thoughts and opinions on a lot of key issues. That started us to really look at him and respect him as a person that came from Piedmont, North Carolina. And he is now one step away from being the governor of North Carolina. So Robinson has said a whole bunch of things on LGBTQ rights, on reproductive freedom, on education, on climate change, some anti-Semitic. If you could think of it, Mark Robinson has an opinion about it, and he's made it known. He's made it known to people. The thought was, we're not going to win an argument with him. I mean, he was going around the state in church pulpits, preaching sermons, and he is not an ordained minister of any faith. Let's just make that known right now. He found himself in positions where he can move people very fiery, very passionate, a lot of hate and anger in his speech. I think the thing is, his words impacted so many folks across North Carolina and the United States. Because as you said, like, some of these headlines didn't just land here in the state, they went globally. And so the coalition came together with a lot of the groups that represent a lot of the communities that he was attacking, represent a lot of the folks that he didn't see as an equal person in life, and really just, put our heads to the table and say, hey, how do we uplift the voice of North Carolina to really educate who he is? Because it was very strategic about what he was doing. He was going to rural North Carolina. He was going to very conservative Christian faith centers and really talking to those folks and moving those folks. You see a point, he was really trying to come around and go into the rural Black communities and really talk about who he is and really paint himself as a one thing, but his words and his actions said another thing. And so the CARE Coalition was formed. We made sure to really give him a hard time, not only before he announced he was running for governor, but during the whole process of him announcing and going forward. Uplifting the voices of North Carolinians was the key to our coalition. This wasn't about, let's just share what Mark Robinson did. No, let's share the impact of what Mark Robinson did and what he said and what legislation he would move if he's governor of North Carolina. And quite frankly, that scared a lot of people, not only on the left, but in the center, in the right. It really scared a lot of folks that this person could lead our state. And North Carolina's been traditional state, has been moving forward. We always consider ourselves kind of the shiny beacon in the South, just really pushing forward, but also, as most folks say, purple state or whatever you want to call it, but just really uplifting the voices of the community. That's always been the foundation of what makes North Carolina great, and just make sure those voices are heard. So again, this coalition came together. We worked nonstop for, over 18 months, just really talking about how problematic it is, educating folks, uplifting voices, reaching out to folks, and really getting involved with community activities. I think the beautiful part about the work is you saw the result and how successful the work was, because when polling first came out after the March primary, it showed that Governor Stein, thankfully, and Mark Robinson were kind of neck and neck in this race. Like, it was really tight. It was a toss-up. Depending on what poll you looked at, Robinson may have been the lead. And we saw over the course of the 2040 year, as we continue to do the work and more folks were educated on who Mark Robinson is and, his stance on a lot of key issues that people care about, we saw the gap opening up a little bit for Governor Stein. And then clearly when CNN dropped the piece in September of 24, that really surprised everybody. Then it took it to the next level in terms of, our word, folks starting to recognize more. There's more chatter around, there's more talk about him. People understand who he clearly is. One thing about Robinson is he was never shy about who he is or his words. This is a person you'll call him out on something about his social media post. And usually if I get called out about a social media post, I'm probably going to delete it. Mark stood firm and just, he left everything where it was. And the people in North Carolina saw that. And like I said, that helped make the decision of who they did not want to lead their state. The coalition really put in a lot of behind the scenes work of just really being very direct in communities we talk to, the people we talk to, and how we strategize on making sure that the word is getting around of who this person really is.
So I want to dig more into that because, one of the things we dive into is the nuts and bolts of this work
Mhm.
in general. Tell me a little bit more about how the coalition was brought together and like recruiting. I mean, he offended and threatened a lot of people from different groups and interest areas. So definitely laid the groundwork. But talk about like how you actually pulled people together and got them talking and developing strategy.
He went after everybody, and everybody wanted to be in the room to have that conversation. So we just organized the folks. We got folks in the room. We're very intentional about this. Like when we met, there was no Zoom meeting. Like I had this thing like 2020 election was inside, 24 is going to be outside. So we had no Zoom link. There was no call-in number. You had to come in person. Some folks traveled 2 or 3 hours across the state just to be in that meeting. And we met on maybe monthly basis, sometimes twice a month, depending on how busy the year is. But folks really dedicated themselves to really stopping this man. They saw him as a threat. And so in those meetings, we really talked about, what are you hearing on the ground in your community? What are folks saying about it? And through this work, there was processes of, let's see what we know about him so far. Let's see what North Carolina knows about him. So really polling people, then treating messaging from it, but then refining that and then giving it to our partners who are on the ground knocking doors. My partners knocked over 4 million doors across North Carolina this election cycle. So really understand these folks are talking to people on the ground. What are you hearing? What are you feeling? How is that message, how is that flow over to you? That doesn't work. Let's take it back. Let's figure out how to refine it. So line between this group setting of bringing these folks together that really in the room and figure out how to do this collectively, taking the information into the community, getting feedback from the community, and then refining it to return to make sure that we are getting the right stuff to the right people. Those meetings at times were intense because, the meeting always led off with, where's Mark Robinson this week? What news clips are you hearing him in? Every meeting, there was some wild, outlandish thing he said in the news. Think about it. If you represent a community and his comment is, if I had my way, science and history wouldn't be taught in school, it's not important. Like that impacts you. That impacts like a lot of folks. And so it wasn't hard to get the folks in the room. It wasn't hard to get the buy-in. The hard part was, how do we do this in an effective way? A lot of times that's what those meetings were about, like really just understanding what he's doing, who he is, but also how do we take this message that he delivered this week and how do we make sure people understand what it really means? So that was the nuts and bolts of really just getting like the buy-in part. The partners were ready. They were dialed in. They understood the threat. And like I said, this is not your normal everyday candidate where it's just like, you got to go really looking under a rock for information. Mark Robinson, as I say, was the gift they kept on giving. It didn't take much for folks to really just come in the room. I give them so much credit because you think about it, we're talking about organizations like Planned Parenthood. We're talking about organizations that represent education, represent community issues, represent Black community. We're really talking about folks. They come into the room, they put their, I wouldn't say egos to the side, but they really leaned in and supported each other to walk away with something we could deliver on. And I really give a lot of the partners across North Carolina credit for that because that's hard. I mean, I don't know about you, but there's been plenty of times where I've sat in meetings and you bring in heavy hitter organizations like that. And sometimes you walk out of the meeting, you don't know why you just sat there for a couple hours. But I will say in this formation, we look forward to having the meetings. We look forward to figuring out what we're going to do this week. We look forward to figuring out what's a great creative way to educate North Carolinians who this person really is. So again, the nuts and bolts of this was very beautiful and just really, folks really leaning in and putting things to the side to understand, let's get aligned on this and let's make sure we go 100% forward together.
I'm just curious about that point because, I've been in a lot of meetings and sometimes they spin off in multiple directions and don't get much done or some groups grandstand. What do you think made those meetings particularly effective? You didn't hold them online because you wanted people to make that commitment to actually physically go, but was it just the kind of extreme shock and concern about what he would do that just helped people keep focus? Or was there a particular approach to like moderating and facilitating the meeting that made sure that they were effective?
I think the initial feeling was it was a threat. You have to realize at the time, our state legislative was in a Republican supermajority. Our state Supreme Court is a Republican majority. And so the last seat we have that, that's in our favor is the governor's seat. And to stop that trifecta from happening, we have to make sure we maintain and hold that seat. Folks understood what that means because traditionally we've been in places where at least one form of government, this is like Civics 101, right? One form of government was able to stop something bad from happening. You get in the governor's seat, it's just game over. They can do whatever they want. And people understood what that means. So I think it had a lot to do with how he would really push that agenda because, again, This is the same gentleman that Donald Trump has said that he was Martin Luther King on steroids, or he was Martin Luther King Jr. 2.0. Like, these are what the Republicans were saying about him before the CNN story
Yeah.
dropped, right? And so people really understood
Yep.
how dangerous, how problematic he is, but also understanding that protecting the governor's seat was a top priority of this
Yeah.
coalition. Because, like I said, we named this operation Save Ourselves. We had to do to save ourselves and save our state. And the first step was to, make sure that Mark Robinson never reaches the governor's mansion.
So one of the key strategies you've talked about that emerged was storytelling to reach a lot of audiences with really clear explanations of here's how this guy is going to affect your life. Can you talk a little bit about how that process worked and how you both got those stories told, and then how did you get them out there so that they were seen?
Well, how did I get them out? Let's start there. I utilized my relationships from my journalism background. So we did a lot of that. And our team is built with folks that had experience in the newsroom. So I don't want to sit here and say like it's just actually me. No, I won't take that credit. But there are a lot of folks that have great minds and great ideas on how do we elevate. I think the big thing we learned is, one, we have to understand North Carolina. North Carolina is a very diverse state, from our mountains to our coast. Another thing is North Carolina has 10 plus media markets, and some parts of our state are in markets shared in other states. So for example, in our western state, there's a few counties that are part of the Tennessee and Georgia television market. In our northeastern part of the state, Elizabeth City, one of our largest northeastern towns, is in the Virginia Beach television market. So we have to understand what the media layout is of our state. Then we have to understand who are the voices and what folks do we have on the ground there. And just building the coalition of folks, we have organizations that represent every corner of the state. So they represent the voices of the people on the ground, folks that they're talking to and they engage with every day. Again, we want this to be about the people and not necessarily about us. Like, so we have someone like Robson that really just says any and everything. It wasn't hard finding folks to really elevate, their perspective on, what they want to see in a government that represents them and what they do not want to see in a person that represents them. So really working through our partners, they really did the groundwork and just finding folks in the community that they've interacted with, they built relationships with, to really uplift their stories. On our end, we just really, met with them, support them along the way, just give them a couple of guidelines in terms of, for example, let's say you're doing an interview for a local newspaper. This is what this paper traditionally likes to write about. This is probably how much time you'll have, what point to share. And we make sure that was an important component of the work. We don't want to tell you what to say because then we're not doing you justice. We want to hear what you have to say. And let's figure out how to craft that into a message to make sure that you're satisfied with it. And it also meets the need of the publication that's running with it. So we ran this campaign in terms of, we call it our earned media campaign. We really look at things from a holistic perspective. There's also people that, they don't mind walking in front of a news camera and really talking, to get interviewed live or speaking at a press event. So let's talk to those folks. There's some folks that really want to utilize their own social media channels. We want to make sure that we're getting our message over social media because, as we learn, a lot of people turn to social media to get their information day to day. Like I said, in some places, press is still traditional in terms of people wake up, they go get their newspaper, they open the newspaper, they sit back and read it. There are many folks, and especially in rural North Carolina, that rely on this service. And so we really wanted to make sure that we're talking to folks that can reach that audience. So really talking about, writing op-eds and letters to the editor to really express how you feel about a particular issue or what Mark said about the issue. So we really approach this all ears and minds open and really just work with folks to figure out what lane is best to elevate your voice. I think I talked about this at America Vote Summit, but on my bingo card was not to talk to Republican voters about how do you feel about Mark Robinson being governor and how that's a big fear for you. That was not on my bingo card for the cycle, but what I learned was there were many folks like that. There were many folks that are very fearful. And we're talking folks that are just like, I voted straight ticket my whole life. This is what I know. And this is too extreme for me. I feel good about the way that we approach the work. I feel good about the voices of the folks that we elevated from across the state. And I feel good getting feedback from those folks that are very satisfied with the product that they saw with themselves in it. So if they saw themselves on TV or read an article and they really felt good about the article and it really encompassed what they wanted to share. And now we're seeing where folks are like reaching out to us like, hey, you need somebody to talk about this. I'm ready to go. And so we're building relationships and expanding on that. But I think it's important to really capture that person and what they're going through and not necessarily what we think they should be saying.
I think that's really interesting because one of the challenges that we face today in the communications environment is there's been a real decline in how much people trust institutions. And I think, more government, but I think also there's a greater likelihood that people look at an organization that's got a spokesperson out there and just think about well, what side are they on and who's behind them and, where are they really coming from and why are they saying that? And people are far more, especially on social media, far more inclined to trust someone that they feel like shares their values, looks like them, looks like people they're familiar with. And that sounds like that was a fundamental element of your strategy, was playing matchmaker between regular people who weren't part of an organization or group that had a story to tell about one or another element of Robinson's platform and what he was talking about, that you could connect up with local media or ask to step in front of a camera. And you guys generated, I think you said at the time, $50 million in earned media. Is that one of the ways that you think the left progressive side needs to adapt to this communications landscape, is getting better at having individual people with stories to tell that align with the audiences you're trying to reach?
Yeah, I would say that's the direction to go. That's it right there. I think elevating the voices of the impacted people is big. Like I said, it helped us tremendously in terms of crafting the narrative of who Mark Robinson is. But again, I always tell folks the right wing media machine is huge. It's a monster. It's billions and billions of dollars pouring into it. But I like to borrow their terminology too. We, the people, will always rise to the occasion. And we want to encompass the people of North Carolina. There are many people that move here every single day for a reason or another. We want to make sure that, one, they understand what's happening here, but two, they understand how they're represented here. The big thing is you got to keep talking to these people. There's close to 11 to 12 million, I'm trying to use my census energy here, but close to 11 to 12 million people in the state. And it's still always in the top categories of the fastest growing, most people moving here. And they're coming from all over the country. And we can't assume because they come from the North or the Midwest that they automatically align with us. They have a story. There's a reason why they're here. And so this will continue. This work has to continue. And I think this has laid the groundwork in terms of how do we build from here. I mean, 46 is around the corner, is a very important race. Really trying to slow down what's happening in DC. We got to change one of those chambers. Really elevate the North Carolinians that are impacted by so many cuts. I mean, every morning there's a cut to something here, especially here in Raleigh.
Yeah.
The educational institution is like the foundation of the Triangle area with some of the top universities in the country. Our pharmaceutical and technology industry here is being cut by, cuts to the government. So there are stories of people every single day that are impacted by what's happening. And this should be the foundation or wherever you are, whatever operation or program you're running. This is really get the people involved, because the one thing that I've seen from it is once they get involved and they feel seen within the movement, they bring other people with them. And now we're growing it. And now we're expanding to different communities and really spreading the brand and elevating the voices.
That's great. It's really encouraging that this coalition is also sticking together for the next cycle. I love it when we keep building on what's been effective and building on successful relationships that work, when you've got a whole group of people that get used to working together and they get used to each other's styles and methods of communications. And you start to find out who's consistent about following up and doing what they said they would do. You get that kind of real groove going with a group of people. And it's just great when you keep it going. So I'm curious also, getting regular people in front of earned media was a key strategy. How did the social, you also mentioned having people post to their socials. Were you able to track metrics on that? How did that work as far as in terms of reaching people? And did that help to engage additional audiences that maybe you wouldn't have been able to reach another way?
Absolutely. I think the funny thing about social media is no matter how much you think you know about it, there's so much you don't know. We've learned by trying and testing a whole lot. I think for example, this year, there's been content that we put together that we put our hearts into, and it may get a low performing number in terms of interactions or impressions, as our social media team likes to say. There's been things we slapped together in 2 seconds and it goes viral. The math of trying to figure out what works there is the most mind-blowing thing ever. But I think the important thing is when you talk to folks about, where they get the information from and how they're getting it, and you hear the Instagrams and the TikToks and the Facebooks, I would say the early stages, especially of our work, a lot of organizations was tapping into Facebook and maybe a little bit of the others too, but they really weren't diving into those things. And now we see a lot of our partners interactive on Instagram with folks, interactive on YouTube, using some of the hashtags to gain traction and attention in communities and places that we normally wouldn't. So I'm seeing folks stepping up to the plate and expanding what their social media capacity is and what it looks like. But I'm also seeing places where folks are trying new things and seeing, what comes from it. One of the things that we tried back in 2020, and we did it just to see what would happen, because one, we realized that's where people get information from. We work with a lot of popular influencers in North Carolina on spreading the message on, when to vote, what you should bring to vote, how you can vote and register on the same day, the dates and times, locations. We work with influencers in 2020 around that program, and the metrics from that we were able to see because of the traffic to the actual web pages, it was wild. And so we realized that, okay, let's bring that back in 24. We were very deliberate about reaching out to social media influencers, and we're very deliberate about who their audience is. So we went through a whole rigorous plan here of, okay, this person has X amount of followers. Let's click on the followers. Are they in North Carolina? Are they, interactive? Or are they just spam bots? And so we were very particular about who we picked, but also seeing what they were saying. Like, some of these folks are already speaking about a lot of the issues that impacted them, but really working with them to expand ourselves, or to expand the word, I would say, into the communities that we probably normally wouldn't have touched. The reaction of it was amazing, because we had one influencer who had a whole lot of followers in the Triangle area, the Raleigh-Durham Chapel Hill area. She shared information about early voting, and one of the popular local coffee shops shared her post about where to vote and how you should vote and what you should bring. Being creative in this moment is what I would encourage a lot of folks to do, like really reaching out to those influencers in your community, those folks that have a voice on the ground, because people are turning to those folks for information. I was just in the barbershop today, and I've never heard ever in my life in my barbershop, people were talking about the Carolina Hurricanes in the playoffs. Like, we're sitting in the barbershop, usually it's about sports, or it's about music, or it may be something about what's going on politically. I've never heard a conversation about hockey in a Black barbershop. And they were in there talking about the game. And it was just like, what is happening? But the thing is, information travels. People are getting it different ways. And now we're having those conversations. And that's important, because, if people are going to continue to turn to those outlets to get their information, we're going to make sure we're doing a great job of putting the right information in front of them, so they have the reliable resources to turn to talk about the things when they're in their communities.
So I'm really curious, what are the things you're trying out right now to get ready for 2026? Because one of the messages that I'm hearing again and again is, as you have said and as you've done, is you got to experiment. You got to try a bunch of different things, basically see what sticks, because you can't really predict the algorithms. You can't predict what's really going to catch fire with people. So tell me about your experiments for the coming cycle.
Right now, we're doing a lot of fun things with TikTok. We're trying to take it to the next level there. We don't know what's going to happen with nobody does, but at the same time, we still gravitate towards it. I think some of us on our team is going down rabbit holes trying to figure out how the algorithm over there works. So we're still trying to figure that, because you can watch 2 seconds of a video and your whole feed is about those 2 seconds of something that you really wasn't watching. You was just getting ready to scroll past. So we're trying to figure that out. Doing some things with YouTube, which have been kind of fun, like YouTube Reels and things of that nature. The biggest thing is get ready to train partners on how to utilize some of those channels to really, take things to the next level. I mean, there's no point for us to hold the information here at Progress or the Care organization, but really share it amongst folks. How you can utilize those channels to share information, and, the creative ways of, making sure of having your information pop up in random places. Out one time, hashtag Doritos challenge. I don't even know what that meant, but we put it on some stuff just to see what kind of people would gravitate towards it. And, it worked in some aspects. That's some of the things that we're trying. I will say recently, we're celebrating the last few days, the decision of Jefferson Griffin Stephen conceding to Justice Allison Riggs.
Great news and such a big relief.
Exactly. The 6-month election that we just never thought would have an end, and, it has an end. But I would say one of the things that was done in the challenge process was uplifting videos of impact of challenge voters. So getting voters to do a 30-second video stating, your name, what community you're from, how long you've been voting, and how do you feel about your vote being challenged. Those videos really done well. Just first person selfie videos, 30 seconds to a minute, really talking about, how you feel about the challenge. Folks were challenged that are traditional voters for some technicalities that was within the State Board of Elections file that was verified. It was verified. So this wasn't voter fraud on any level. This was just, oh, your last name's spelled incorrect. Let me throw your vote out. Or you're military overseas. This is what was happening here in North Carolina. To hear those folks passionately speak about how important voting is to them, how they got ready for this day, how they look forward to this day. We had one person, she's a first-time voter, and she was challenged. And it made her question, like, should I ever vote again? Like, do I want to be a part of this process? This is my first time. I've already been challenged. Get those folks sharing their videos and their perspective. Really did well on social media and really really drew a lot of attention to folks. And I think that's something we'll continue to try going forward and kind of fine tune what that looks like. So that's one of the things I think we're working with now is how do we get more folks to share their own personal story and use their own platforms to push it out, but use the format to where, you're stating who you are, you're talking about the point of why you're talking and what folks can do. So really, who you are, the impact and the action you can take on your own end. So really just really crafting more of what that looks like, but also getting it out more so folks can do that.
I think that's great. I mean, everybody's got a platform of, various sizes, but getting people to use them spreads the word at the very least amongst whoever's already in their network. And right, you might have something that catches fire and really goes much broader.
Exactly.
I like that tactic a lot. I've talked to people about it as well in the course of my day job, which is organizing a bunch of environmental groups at the federal level. One of the challenges that I think particularly larger maybe groups face with this media environment is it's really hard to reach a massive number of people unless you empower other people to carry that message. And so groups, working with creators who are concerned maybe about your issue, whether it's, prison reform or environmental justice or education, whatever, but you have to relinquish some of the control over exactly what they're going to say. Usually the bigger the organization, the more people who insist on having, review like statements that go out. And so one of the challenges is how do you, as a group that usually carefully tends exactly what you're saying, how do you work with creators and get that level of comfort knowing, they're going to talk about it generally in the right way, maybe not the same way we would talk about it. Was that a challenge for some of the groups that you were working with, or were people just like, no, let's just cut them loose, let them rip?
Let's go back to where I'm talking about, like we're polling folks on issues and identifying who Robson is and their impression on what their comments they hear, and then drafting messaging for that and then taking it out to the community. Our messaging that we always said is a recommendation. You know your community better than we do. You know the folks you talk to better than we do. Take this message and talk to folks in a way that resonates with them. There's no one set message that works for everybody. I mean, as a person that's been here my whole life, I know the folks in Charlotte, North Carolina don't have the same issues as the folks in Elizabeth City. I know the folks in Raleigh don't have the same issues as people at Carolina Beach. These organizations taking the messaging, talking to it on the ground in their respective communities, but also getting feedback. I think that's important. That's the important component here. Getting feedback from the community, because we take that feedback very seriously. We bring it back and now we refine that message and then we return it to the communities that these folks, these folks really represent. That's the important piece here, to make sure that this was an inclusive process of organization, of community, and of our friends who are very strategic in terms of how to do this thing that we call polls and messaging, like really understanding, what the products we're putting out there, but also getting feedback to make sure that we're really putting things in the community that can really be shared amongst the folks there. And so there's not one message. We've learned that. I think in the past, folks have tried to do the one message thing or the one idea, the one strategy thing, and that didn't work. There's many different ways to get to victory. And, one thing that we're about is let's try things. And if we fail, failure is good. Let's fail at some things. Let's fail at some ideas and let's figure out, was it just a bad idea overall? Or should we refine, certain components of it and then, put it back out and see what happens with it? People really leaned into that. Like, I know how to talk to my community. I know what my community wants. Can we do it this way? Your way is cool, but can we create something this way? And a lot of times the information that we actually took back to test and poll came from the community. Like, it didn't come from the people, that put these things together. It came from the people on the ground. I'm hearing people talk about, Black men leaning more because he's a Black Republican, has conservative, shows leadership in the household. Can we test to see how that really reaches folks? Like, these are some of the things that we brought back and actually put to work to see how, what the response is from what the community's here on the ground. So there's not one message, there's many messages, but I think the alignment was he had his issues and he had the things he's going to stand firm on. How does that impact you? And how do we make sure that you have the right message to share with the people in your community of that same, sentiment that you feel like, you're totally against what he's saying and doing?
As a communicator, how do you think about the current media landscape? We've obviously talked about storytelling and social media. How else do we need to adapt on the left in order to be able to reach more of the audiences that we need to be able to get to? What else should our community be doing?
That's a good question.
It's one of my favorite, and I keep asking it.
I give you Durrell Johnson's answer, and this does not represent any of the organization, the work that I do or stand for. I really think we should get back outside. A lot of times we're sitting in front of monitors, we're sitting in front of computers, we're sitting in front of our phones. We're not outside interacting with people. The other day, I was just I was going for a walk and I actually saw a bunch of kids outside playing football on this field that I've never seen being used a day in my life. A very large, diverse group of kids outside playing football. And it actually gave me hope for humanity. Like, oh, kids still go outside, they still play. I really think that we got to get back to the fundamentals of community. No place in North Carolina should be off limits. No community should be off limits. We got to get back out, interact with folks, listen to folks, have conversations. What resources can we provide for folks? Like, I don't think a lot of that is done. I think a lot of our partners do a hell of a job of really doing that. But I think there's so much more that can be done, not only from the organizations that do the work, but just people that have voice in the community every day. Like, really just, listening and understanding, but also just being out in interaction and fellowshipping a lot more. That would be what I would say, what I would love to see a lot more of. Just because what we've seen through the results of the CARE Coalition's work is we spend a lot of time on the ground in the communities, talking to folks, hearing back from folks, taking their concern and taking it seriously and taking it to, our meetings and, coming back with a product for them to help, for them to share the word. So really just listen to folks. The media landscape is going to continue to change. Social media is in the direction it's going to be where everyone turns to. And you see our large television media networks and stuff turning to social media. When I was in the newsroom, reporters were like, you have to do a live or you have to do a video for your social media to say what you're covering today to get, some interaction, interact with the people there. We're seeing now where a lot of news stations, their news broadcasts are live on social media. We're seeing where they're breaking news on social media because there's a larger audience there. And so that will always change. That will always keep going in a direction. I don't know what the next level would be. I'm hearing some conversations of folks talking about getting into the gaming world. So getting online with the Twitch accounts and really doing some stuff there, some other streaming platforms. So like I said, it will always and forever change, but community is still the foundation of it all. And as long as we get a lot of those folks to elevate and share in those platforms, those spaces, we'll still be able to reach the folks that we traditionally can't reach. But get outside, get on the ground, touch the grass, people. Please touch the grass.
Do you think progressives do enough storytelling? I come from the environmental world where we have definitely relied more on like facts and figures and charts as opposed to like storytelling. When you look like beyond North Carolina, do you think that progressive and liberals, are we doing enough storytelling or do we need to be doing more?
I certainly think more. And I think each state has a story to tell. And that story is going to look different in all 50 states. Again, the key component is the communities first, the people, the impacted folks. The voices are important. When I first came into this work from working in television news, the first thing that I told folks was a survey. And I surveyed partner organizations and just whoever else got the survey on our list. And I surveyed them, what is your impression on media? Who do you turn to for your information? How much of it do you believe is true? What more would you like to see in news? From that survey, there were a lot of folks that don't understand how television news work. And I'm saying these are partner organizations. These are people that follow the work we do. They really understand how news works. So my first goal was to come in and let's give an understanding of how news works. You're mad at that reporter for a story, but their story is probably not the story the reporter wanted to work on anyway. That probably came from a producer or the news director that said, you got to do this today. So really understanding what a newsroom looks like and how it functions. And I think the piece there is one thing that we always say in the newsroom is we want to hear from more impact. We want to hear from more people that are impacted by the issue. It's great to run to the organization that represents the issue and hear from the person on their staff and hear them speak so great about it. But it's still something compelling about that everyday person that's not a part of the organization. They're speaking on the same issue and how to impact it, right? And so I brought a lot of that attitude and energy into what we do here. And anywhere that I go when I talk about bringing that attitude and energy over because reporters love it. You always want to be the first to hear from somebody that's impacted by something. You want to be the first.
Right. Because there's an emotional energy.
Exactly.
If you're directly affected by something, there's an emotional energy. I mean, and that's what drives social media is emotion in the end.
Exactly.
So that makes perfect sense.
So again, there's so many stories that aren't told, and there's so many people that are on the cusp of telling their story. And I'll refer back to a story briefly of a person that we just, we got connected to when we were going through once Roe v. Wade pretty much went in reverse and, states started rolling out sweeping legislation around reproductive freedom, we saw here in North Carolina, the same thing was happening here. And we actually met a champion, I'm calling her a champion of what storytelling is, who had an abortion when she was a teenager. She was so ashamed, never shared her story, didn't want to talk about it, just kind of kept to herself. She saw what was happening in North Carolina and she could not resist to share like she had to share her story. She said, I couldn't be quiet much. I couldn't be quiet anymore. I couldn't be silenced anymore. What was happening, what could possibly happen to folks was very scary to me. And I had to say something. And we worked with her and uplifted her voice. You saw a person that was nervous and terrified about doing this, and rightfully so, given the world and the climate that we're in, rightfully so. And when she done it, you saw so much relief, so much happiness in terms of she felt free. People that, she's never shared this story with saw her story and they came in to support her. She was at the gym and someone was like, I saw your story. Oh my God, I didn't know, but I got your back 100%. And again, like now she's out, talking to other folks and share their story. Now she's politically involved with what's going on and protecting women's rights. There's lots more people in this country, in the state that you represent, that has that story that's on that cusp of really just ready to impact and promote change. I take it as my personal job to find those folks and support those folks along the way. And again, this is how you move people, because now we're talking about, earned media, although earned media sounds like one thing to the functionality of the work we do. But the other thing is that's a voice on television that someone at home that would probably relate to and now they're ready to share their story. So again, storytelling is the key. There are so many stories in your own community that you don't know about, and building those relationships with those partners that work in those communities, but also through yourself and being a part of those communities and being a part of what's happening there is very key to elevating voices to, make sure they're promoting the right change in the country and not necessarily just going off whatever the propaganda may be for the week.
Right on. That seems like a great place to start to wrap up. So I would love to know, what is a lesson that you learned early on or a piece of advice from a mentor that has shaped your outlook and how you approach things that you'd like to pass on to others?
I would say, okay, so funny story. I'm going back to my news thing because I think about this story all the time. And I'm like, did this person have some magic skill or gift that I didn't know about? So I was working in news. I was coming in the newsroom. I was covering some breaking news and I came in, gave all the information about it, gave the video, put it in the system and all that fun stuff, get it ready for air. And my assignment desk manager at the time was saying, hey, great job today. You always do a great job. Never have a doubt in you. And he was like, why are you in this newsroom? I was like, what? He was like, why are you here? And I was like, well, this is what I always want to do. This is my dream, whatever. I kid you not, that his words were, you should be out here saving the world, making a difference. And he said that to me. And my young initial reaction was, are you trying to run me out of here? I think about what he said to me a lot. Honestly, I think about it probably on a monthly basis because, again, there are people around you that are cheering for you. There are people around you that are supporting you, that see something in you that you may not see in yourself. And it's funny, like he said that. And today, here I am trying my best to, uplift the voices of North Carolina in the best way I know how. And it's just crazy that he saw that years ago. And I was just thought that I was in my comfort, living my dream, having fun. My advice to people would be, don't ever think that wherever you are is the end. It's probably just the beginning, regardless of your age, where you are in your life, where you are in your career. That's probably the beginning of great things to come or more to come, and not necessarily the end game of what you think, your life or career is. So that'd be my biggest advice, because I still think about that and wow, that somebody saw that in me when I was just loving what I was doing.
Oh, that's great. Durrell, thank you so much for taking time to talk today. I really appreciate it. It's been great to get to know you a little bit more, and you're doing just terrific work. Thanks for tuning into The Campaign Strategist, where we dive into the art and science of advocacy. The podcast is produced by Prismatic Strategies to share wisdom and insights from leaders in the field. I'm your host, Pete Altman. Music was written by Andrea Perry and Pete Altman, and this is edited by Abby Altman. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with others who care about making a difference. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again, and see you next time.